Now, one of the things I did actually last week is I went online to just try to find. I know there's lots of articles on try to improve our relations with the police. One of the things I found interesting was it was titled 15 Things You Should Never Do When You Get Pulled Over. And while it sounds kind of tongue-in-cheek, it actually had some really good words of wisdom and advice that I have the, if you pull up the author's name or actually the magazine that it came out of, I actually have the link on the bottom if you want to take a look at that. But these are 15 things that you should not do if you ever get pulled over. And I want to go over them real quickly. Don't panic. Again, anytime an officer makes contact in the field with a person, motorist, it's one of those situations we as officers need to make sure that we're safe when we make contact with the residents, whether it's a simple traffic stop or a stop sign. We don't know who we're going to come in contact with. It could be somebody who's very, very dangerous, and we don't know. You know, we're wearing our bands on our badges because we lost a Sacramento officer last week. She was shot through the door by a suspect who had a high-power rifle, and her funeral is actually tomorrow. So it's one of those things you don't know who you're coming in contact with. So if you panic or act a little different, then it kind of raises our senses, and we want to make sure that we don't do anything, to escalate it. So we, just remain calm. Always wear your seatbelt. If you get stopped, don't take your seatbelt off, because if an officer comes up to you, he might not have seen the seatbelt being worn, and it's better not to be moving your hands around. Just leave your seatbelt on, and you can take that off after you're asked for your license or something to that effect. One of the things is the officer is going to come up to you, he's going to ask you for your driver's license, registration, insurance, and he's going to explain some things. The first thing is you don't want to all of a sudden start hammering with questions, because you want to create an environment where it's actually a mutual, respectful situation. So the officer has a job to do, and the more positive the exchange of dialogue, the more positive the results will be. Now, this is a hard one. Don't argue. I know if you've been stopped for something and you believe you weren't responsible for what you're being accused of, that's not the time to argue. The officers we do make mistakes. We might see something and we don't record it right. We don't see it right. The proper resolution for that is basically court. Let a judicial system look at that and figure out if it's warranted or not. And again, police officers do make mistakes, and police officers aren't going to get upset if they go to court and they lose a traffic ticket. I mean, I worked traffic for many years, and I've lost cases. It's one of those things, and it's up to the judge. That's the proper venue for argument. Don't reach for your license. It goes without saying. Officers are on high alert. They don't want to see a situation where somebody's reaching for something. They don't know what you're reaching for. So, usually the best thing is just to hold on to the steering wheel, and once they ask you for a license, and then you can go ahead and unbuckle and reach for your license. And then don't put your hands out of sight. Don't be fumbling with things in your glove box and things like that. Just keep your hands on your steering wheel, and that's the safest thing to do. Don't admit guilt. That's part of that. That's the article of prevention. Don't admit guilt. Sometimes it's better just to not say anything. And if you know you're wrong, let the facts speak for themselves. Don't leave your car. That's probably one of the worst things you do is getting pulled over and jumping out of the car immediately, coming towards the officer because you want to explain something. I've seen a lot of situations where somebody might be needing to go to the restroom, or they're having a baby, something like that. Once the officer, don't jump in a car, because that's what really the red flags go up and the spider senses start tingling. Something's going on here, and that's where you want to make sure you're safe, and because then it kind of starts to go a certain way that you don't want it to go. Don't resist, and I think this is in the context if you're being stopped for something where it might be a misdemeanor, you might be drunk driving, things like that. You might have a warrant. Don't resist. That's another violation, and go along with the program. If it's something that is legitimate, again, if it's something you don't agree with, the proper venue for that is in the courtroom. Don't pull over in a potentially dangerous spot. Especially if you're on the freeway, you want to make sure you pull over in a safe location. You don't want to pull in a position where your vehicle's sticking out in traffic, or you're in an area where a lot of traffic is. Just try to pull over in a safe spot, especially if it's a very, very dark spot. Try to find a light light standard that you can park under. Don't encroach on an officer's personal space. As officers, we're trained to have more of a character, a practice to be safe, and there's a personal bubble officers have that you should not encroach on. That, when you get too close to an officer, we don't know what you're going to do. There's different training that we go through that teach you, hey, you want to keep a safe distance. They teach you when you're an officer how to stand, how to talk to people, how to keep the distance from somebody. Once you get too close to an officer, then you're basically encroaching on his safety in that bubble, and it has, again, the red alarm starts going off, like, what's this guy doing? So just make sure you stay at a safe distance. Don't do anything before understand your rights. Again, this goes along with the don't admit guilt. If you need to understand your rights, if you've done something where you actually have to be read your rights, if you feel like the officer is going to do something that's not appropriate, whether it's searching you without cause, there's officers aren't allowed to search you under certain circumstances. And if you feel that those certain circumstances aren't met, then you can verbalize the officer, but understand your rights. And if you haven't done research those topics online, that's something I would recommend you do. Don't refuse to sign the citation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you get pulled over and you end up getting cited for something you don't think you did, again, officers make mistakes, but don't argue it. The proper venue is in court, in the traffic court. Don't get distracted. A lot of times, as officers are talking to you, and they don't need you as a motorist to be fumbling on your phone, doing things, getting distracted. Obviously, having a contact with a police officer is bad enough, but being distracted, causing a little bit of chaos for the situation, it won't go as smoothly as it can unless you are paying attention and following the directions of the officer. And lastly, don't try to outrun the police. There are still departments in the state of California that will chase you until they catch you. Due to liability reasons, our supervisor will ensure that does not happen. We as a policy will not chase people unless you're a violent felon, a danger to the community, then that's a different story. But there are departments, CHP, they still chase you until they catch you.